Hello, welcome to Alyssa Teen's Reviews. My name, of course, is Alyssa, and this is my video for the 10 worst Star Trek Holodeck episodes. This is a part of a monthly series of videos in which I pick a category and do my best and worst in that category. So I picked holodecks primarily for the worst list, so that I could rant and rave about all the bad holodeck episodes. I think the majority of them are not very good. It was very difficult to narrow it down to just 10, whereas on the flip side, next week's video, the top 10 best holodeck episodes, it was really difficult to come up with 10. I was thinking I might just do a top 9 for a little while, and I found a 10th one. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll put that one on to make it an even 10. But it was really hard to even think of 10 good ones, whereas here it was hard to narrow it down to only 10, because I do think holodeck episodes generally are not very good. So I should make it clear, as I talk about in a lot of these other top 10s, that this is just based on my opinion and my opinion alone, nothing else. And it's important here because my opinion does not align with popular opinion. I did a Google search for best holodeck episodes to maybe try to get some ideas for episodes to add to my top 10 best list. And without fail, all the top 10s or all the best lists that I was coming up with featured several episodes that will be right here on my worst list. I think that a lot of people find some of these episodes funny. I've heard the word fun used for a lot of these episodes. My brother and I have this running joke that fun is code for bad episode. Oftentimes it is. So there are several types of bad holodeck episodes. So there is the comedy, and I guess other people might find them funny or fun, whereas I, as a child of sitcoms, someone who grew up watching sitcoms from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that these bad holodeck episodes oftentimes will overuse sitcom tropes that were really never that great to begin with, but I've seen them a million times, and when I've seen them before, I saw them as written by comedy writers and performed by comedy actors, whereas here in Star Trek, it is not comedy writers, not comedy actors, and is cringeworthy a lot of the times, and I just find them to be objectively bad. I know it's not objectively bad, it's opinion, but I don't know how you could watch some of these and not understand that these are overused sitcom tropes that were better when they were done before, the first 5 million times they were done before. Maybe it's just me because I've watched a lot of sitcoms. I don't know, but I find it to be awful. Another bad holodeck trope is this idea that all of these characters in the 24th century are so obsessed with the 20th century and so different aspects of the 20th century. So we here in the 21st century, are we all obsessed about the 17th century? Are we all going around like reenacting different things from the 17th century all the time and finding different aspects of 17th century culture and obsessing over it? I mean, why is that a thing? And then in Enterprise, it's not really holodeck related, but they go and watch all those 1930s black and white movies, which makes no sense that a crew in the 22nd century would do that all the time. It makes no sense. So I hate this idea that's perpetuated by a lot of holodeck episodes that our 24th century crew is so obsessed with the 20th century. It makes no sense to me. And then you have your other common bad holodeck tropes, like the safeties getting turned off, the exit doors don't work, so that we can create a sense of tension and a sense of danger in the episode. And oftentimes this is combined with the comedy, bad comedy, as well. So here's the thing about holodeck safeties and how they always, malfunction all the time. First of all, whoever made these holodeck safeties should be fired, since they malfunction constantly. But also, why do they exist? So holodecks on a starship are primarily used for leisure, for Starfleet officers to get some R&R during their off times. I mean, sometimes it's used for training, but usually it's for leisure. So why would you make it possible for your officers to get injured or killed when on their leisure time? Like, why would you increase the chance? Starfleet's already dangerous as it is. Like, why would you increase the chances of that? Can you imagine, like, being Captain Picard and having to call the family of one of your dead officers? So, like, I'm sorry, he passed away. Oh no, what happened? Was it the Romulans? Was it an attack? Was it a strange creature? No, he was shot by a 1920s gangster in the holodeck during his downtime. What? What kind of awful captain are you? Like, what? So I think that the holodeck should have just been designed so you can't get shot by bullets, you can't get hurt by knives, you can't get hurt. That should be integral to the design of the holodeck. That should just be how it is. There should have to be safeties that you could turn on and off, or safeties that can malfunction, because they always do malfunction. Like, it's just so stupid. So I'm going to be talking about all of those things on this list, and beware, you may like some of these episodes. I think they are all awful, and there are plenty of other awful episodes about holodecks that I couldn't even fit on this list. So let me go ahead, dive in to my top 10 worst holodeck episodes. Number 10. At number 10, the big goodbye from Star Trek The Next Generation's first season. So as I was doing my Google search and looking up all of other people's best holodeck episode list, this episode almost without fail was showing up on everyone's best list. Perhaps people give it credit for being the first holodeck episode and being the one that started it all. Well, I blame it for being the one that started it all. It set the standard for all of the bad holodeck tropes that I was talking about in my intro. It really checks off all the boxes: bad comedy, 24th century character inexplicably being obsessed with an obscure aspect of 20th century culture, holodeck safeties getting turned off, exits and doors not working, all of that stuff. I put this right in with all of the rest of Star Trek Next Generation Season 1, which is to say it is a bad episode, just like all of the other ones in that season. There are very few that are even mediocre, and so I will respectfully disagree that this deserves to be on a best list for holodeck episodes. For me, this deserves our scorn for starting it all, and it is number 10 on my worst holodeck episode list. Number 9? Number 9? Number 9? At number 9, Unexpected from Star Trek Enterprise. And I should note here that this list, as well as next week's best holodeck episode list, does include anything that functions like a holodeck, whether it's called a holodeck or not. Of course, we also have our HOLOSUITEs in Deep Space Nine. So this was like the third or fourth episode in the entire series of Star Trek Enterprise, and this episode just speaks very clearly to me that the showrunners of Enterprise immediately regretted doing a prequel. They were like, oh shit! We can't have holodecks. We can't have holodeck safeties getting turned off. We can't do zany sitcom comedy in a holodeck. What are we gonna do? So let's just find an excuse to get a holodeck on Star Trek Enterprise. So they have the Enterprise encounter this alien species that is very different from them. And at first it was interesting because Trip goes over to the ship to do repairs, and he has to acclimate to their gravity and to their atmosphere for a little while first. So that was interesting. But these aliens are presented as ones who are not that far advanced because Trip is able to do repairs on their ship, so their ship can't be that far in advance of the Enterprise, and yet inexplicably they have this device that is 200 years more advanced than the Enterprise, which is of course what we would call a holodeck, even though they don't call it that. And it was completely pointless, actually there was a point to it, I'll get to that in a minute, the point is stupid, where Trip goes in to this lovely scene with this alien woman and he puts his hand in this like Zen garden thing or whatever, and it like makes him pregnant. And so the whole point of this was just to go, a man got pregnant, isn't that funny? It's just so stupid. So the showrunners of Enterprise were just so desperate to have a holodeck in their show that they made up a bad excuse to have one and then wrote the worst possible story for their holodeck. So that is why this episode makes number 9 on my worst list.
Number 8, not so great.
At number 8, His Way from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Now it kind of pains me to have to put this one on because I love the Odo and Kira relationship, and this is the episode where that really starts. And I did name Odo and Kira as I think my number 5 or number 6 best romance and relationship when I did that category a few months ago. But Vic Fontaine. Okay, so one of the showrunners or writers of Deep Space Nine, and I forget which one, I get all of those guys mixed up, but I know that there was one of them who was really obsessed with crappy Vegas lounge music and just had to find a way to incorporate it into his show, and therefore ruining my fucking sci-fi with the world's worst genre of crappy white people soulless music that you can ever possibly imagine. Ruining my sci-fi. And there really is no good explanation for why Vic Fontaine is sentient. He was made by some dude. I forget the dude's name, but he's always off screen. He's like Norm's wife from Cheers. So if this guy is like that much of a genius to create sentient holograms willy-nilly, I'm sure he was really interested to meet the Doctor when Voyager got back to the Alpha Quadrant, right? Because he's got to be one of the premier holodeck scientists who can just create willy-nilly sentient beings. No, they just made him sentient just for plot convenience, just so that one of the writers of Deep Space Nine could force his crappy obsession with horrible music onto us. And each episode, including this one, includes like a 10-minute crappy lounge song. I am not watching sci-fi for a variety show. I don't watch Star Trek to have a little musical number at the end, especially when it's the world's worst genre of music. So I hate Vic Fontaine, and therefore I have to put this episode on here, which, by the way, also features a horrible comedy trope with the misunderstanding of Odo thinking that Kira is just a hologram, but it's the real Kira. Ha ha ha! Horrible sitcom trope. Okay, so don't you worry though, this will not be the last appearance of Vic Fontaine on this list. He will be back. Number 7. At number 7, A Fistful of Datas from Star Trek The Next Generation. So this is another episode that I was commonly seeing on other people's best holodeck episode list. It's also one that I've included on other worst lists that I've done in the past, both on my current channel and my previous channel. And I've gotten pushback on this one. A lot of people really enjoy this one. And I think, a lot of people are big into Westerns. I'm not. It's not one of my favorite genres. But my hatred of Westerns is not even the number one reason why I dislike this episode. I think primarily it's that it just, again, checks off all of those boxes of bad holodeck episodes. It's a bad comedy. The safeties turn off for no reason. The doors don't open for no reason. Really, there's not even a plot in this episode. It's just all an excuse to have a Western and have Brent Spiner do all these silly characters. And okay, I love Brent Spiner. He's amazing as Data and as Lore, but when he tries to do comedy on Star Trek, I'm sorry, it's cringeworthy. Like, I feel really embarrassed for the guy. Like, it's just not good. It's not good. I'm sorry. It's just really, really not good. So, Fistful of Datas, I'm sorry if you're a fan of it. I just can't handle it. It just checks off all the boxes of all the bad holodeck tropes, really for no reason whatsoever. Number 6. At number 6, Author from Star Trek Voyager. And now we enter the Voyager part of the show as Voyager dominates the top 6, with 4 out of the next 6 entries being from Star Trek Voyager. Now there are several possible reasons for this, not the least of which Voyager has the most number of holodeck episodes, but also I think the holodeck trope was just played out by the time Voyager came around. So as for this particular episode, I hate it for maybe some different reasons than I hate a lot of the other episodes on this list. I mean, it does have bad sitcom tropes. It has the slimy character who thinks he's better than everyone else and plays out these scenarios where he's superior to everyone, which I have seen on sitcoms. Not super common, but I've seen it. But it's usually from a character like Larry from Three's Company or something like that that has already been established as being slimy, whereas this episode shows me that all the character growth that we've been building toward for the Doctor culminates in him becoming a narcissistic asshole who thinks he's superior to everybody. In fact, the next episode after this, he does straight up tell Janeway he's superior to her. And I just had a hard time finding humor in the holo novel. First of all, it's a dumb holo novel. Like, who's gonna read that? Or I guess you interact with it. That's dumb. It's not a very good holo novel. But also, like, the fact that him thinking he's superior to everybody is his holo novel. It makes me sad that that's where the Doctor's character went to, and I can't find any humor in that. I did find some humor when Tom Paris turned it against him and did his own holo novel. That was actually pretty funny, and if it kind of ended with that being the resolution, I might have gotten something out of this, and if the Doctor kind of learned and then grew from that and like, oh yeah, I did just shit on my friends, instead of the very next episode turning around and telling Janeway he's superior to her. So there's no growth there. Instead of it ending there, it inexplicably goes toward being a ripoff of the Next Generation episode Measure of a Man. And I honestly had no sympathy for the Doctor. I just think that he made his bed, he needs to lay on it. It's his own goddamn fault, and Janeway shouldn't have stuck up for him. And it's sad, because I did like the Doctor as a character until season 7 of Voyager. And so this episode makes my list for being the death of the Doctor as a decent character. Number 5. At number 5, also from Star Trek Voyager, this time from season 3, Alter Ego. So a thing that Voyager liked to do for some weird reason was each season they would have the characters all hang out at a certain holodeck program, and they would all do it together, and it was their big hangout place. I think they were trying to recreate the Vic Fontaine thing from Deep Space Nine, but they kept changing it every year. Well, actually, I think the first 2 seasons were both the French pool hall. The 3rd season was the Tiki Hawaiian bar. 4th season didn't have one. The 4th season is really good. 5th season had Captain Proton. 6th season, we'll get to that a little bit later on in this list. Stay tuned for that. Let's turn our focus to the 3rd season version, which was the Tiki Bar, which was culturally insensitive, and it also made absolutely no sense that Tuvok or Neelix would be hanging out here all the time and give a shit about this Hawaiian thing. It just made no sense. I was okay with the French pool hall. They may as well have just kept the French pool hall, quite honestly. So with this particular episode, this represents the worst in the 3rd season Tiki Bar Hangout holodeck program. This is where Harry Kim falls wildly in love with a woman who appears to be a sentient holodeck program, and then Tuvok also is falling in love with her, and Harry Kim and Tuvok are fighting over her, which it just makes me laugh, even just talking about it, and not laughing because it's funny. I'm not laughing with it, I'm laughing at it because it's so bad. And turns out that it's just the typical, like, female alien trying to lure in the men but with her sexual wilds. A trope that has been way overdone in sci-fi and is not usually very good. See The Muse from Deep Space Nine as another example of this awful trope, combined with this awful holodeck program. That makes Alter Ego number 5 on my list of worst holodeck episodes. 4? At number 4, Take Me Out to the HOLOSUITE from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Here's another beloved episode that people will disagree with me on, but to me this is not funny, this is not fun, this is just an episode full of awful sitcom tropes. And when I was doing my intro and talking about episodes that are written by not comedy writers and performed by not comedy actors, this episode is what first and foremost comes into my mind. So this has the awful sitcom trope of the male character coming across his old high school buddy. I know it's Starfleet Academy in this case. His old high school buddy who he always had a competition with, and his old high school buddy always beats him out. Usually in the sitcom, it's usually the wife just tells him at the end, "No, I love you anyway," or something. But they incorporated here with a Vulcan, and it really makes no sense. These are the most emotional Vulcans I've ever seen in my life. These guys are assholes, and I know Vulcans kind of lean that way a lot of the times anyways, but these guys are just straight up emotional assholes. And the fact that there is a Starfleet ship that is full of only Vulcans and no humans, that makes no sense. And that's the type of thing that I could forgive a Star Trek Lower Decks for doing years later when Lower Decks became a show, because Lower Decks was an animated show and a comedy, and you can suspend disbelief a little bit. Deep Space Nine is not a comedy, it's a serious show. I refuse to suspend disbelief for the idea that there would be a Starfleet ship with Vulcans only. I also cannot suspend disbelief that they would take 2 weeks to practice for a baseball game in the middle of a war. I have joked with my brother often that Wayun and Damar should have attacked the station during that 2 weeks when the crew was busy practicing for a meaningless baseball game on the fucking HoloSuite and just destroyed the whole station, and boom, the Dominion wins the war. This is just, I'm sorry, but I just don't get any joy out of this episode. It's just too awful for me. I'm sorry, it's too bad. I can't deal with it.
The Three Amigos.
At number 3, Human Error from Star Trek Voyager, and we now return to our regularly scheduled Bad Voyager holodeck episodes. So, as Author was, in my opinion, the episode that really definitively ruined the Doctor's character, Human Error does the same thing for 7 of 9, although by the time we get to this point in late Season 7, it was already a long time coming. So they used to be able to write really good, compelling stories for 7 of 9. Really good stories about her struggle for humanity, because the thing about 7 of 9's struggle for humanity, that it wasn't about becoming fully human and just being a normal human who behaves like all the other humans. That was never going to happen for her. It was always about finding that balance between the Borg in her, because her whole personality is Borg. She spent most of her life that way, and being a human and having compassion for others and those sorts of things that Janeway was trying to teach her. So it was trying to strike that balance. Here, she now wants to give up all of that, and out of nowhere, completely out of character for her, she just wants to be like a, I guess, typical soap opera woman? I don't know what this is supposed to be. This is not something 7 of 9 has ever wanted. And all of a sudden she's doing a Lieutenant Barclay and spending all of her time in the holodeck, which is completely out of character for her and makes no sense at all. But this episode is as high as it is on my list because it is the episode that first introduces My number one worst romance and relationship in Star Trek from the videos that I did a couple months ago, Chakotay and Seven of Nine, an absolutely awful idea. There was never any chemistry between these characters, and I just do not buy that Seven of Nine would have these fantasies about a character that she has no chemistry with in the holodeck. It's just really hard to sit through.
Number 2.
At number 2, from Star Trek Voyager, a pair of Season 6 episodes, FAIRHAVEN and Spirit Folk. No, this is not a two-parter. These are 2 separate episodes. Call it a tie if you would like. I just had to put these together because it's kind of the same thing. It's this thing that I was talking about earlier, where the Voyager crew is obsessed with hanging out in a 19th century Irish town for no reason whatsoever. I am not sure which writer or showrunner on Voyager had an obsession with 19th century Irish towns that they felt like that they needed to have this. There are so many awful things in these 2 episodes. I'm just not even going to have time to go through them all. We have, in FAIRHAVEN, Janeway creating her sex toy. Like, okay, I get it. She's lonely. Her husband left her. She's in the Delta Quadrant. She'll do stuff like that. I don't need to see it on screen. It was kind of weird. Also, that episode was incredibly boring. There was really no plot in it. Spirit Folk had a plot, a really dumb one, where now the Irish people see Tom Paris and Harry Kim. I think they beamed something away or something. They see the technology and they think they're like fae and fairies and magical spirits. And there really isn't a great explanation for how these holodeck characters that aren't supposed to be able to notice things like that can suddenly see that. I think they did come up with some weak sauce explanation for it, but I didn't buy it. So both of these episodes combined are terrible, and just speaks to me again to why did Voyager have to keep having the crew hang out in these different locations every season? This one even made less sense than the Tiki Bar that like Tuvok and Neelix and everyone would just love to go hang out in this Irish town. This just it's so awful. And that is why it is number 2 on my worst list. There is only one man who could defeat Spirit Folk and FAIRHAVEN, and his name starts with a V, and we'll get to him now. Number 1. At number 1, Bada Bing, Bada Bang, starring my man, Vic Fontaine. Now, I've already gone on to my rant about Vic Fontaine and why the character makes no sense, why I hate him as a character, why I hate the fact that Deep Space Nine has to ruin my sci-fi by having 10-minute lounge songs at the end of episodes. The worst genre in the history of mankind. I already went through all of that. Now, as for this particular episode, just kind of like what I said with Take Me Out to the HoloSuite, I can't suspend disbelief that Wei-Yun and Damar wouldn't attack the station. Where's their intelligence? Didn't they get word that the Deep Space Nine crew is wasting their time reenacting a second-rate heist movie in the HoloSuite? That would be the perfect time to take over the station. Attack the station now! Attack it now! Why did they not do that? So yeah, this is a second-rate heist movie. It's not funny. Of course, it makes no sense that they have to help out Vic Fontaine because this is a fake scenario. There's no reason you have to help him out. But again, he's inexplicably sentient. This makes no sense. But the worst thing about this episode is that it tricked me into thinking it might actually be doing something good, because there's a point early in the episode where Sisko declines to go into this holodeck program because he says accurately that this was not a great time period in history for his people. These African Americans were not treated well during this particular period, and in this particular setting, they were not treated well. So he wanted nothing to do with it. Good for you, Cisco. But then not only does he go into the program anyway, but by the end of it, he has sold out all of his morals and values and is up on stage singing the cheesiest of cheesy lounge songs with the cheesiest smile I've ever seen, singing with Vic Fontaine. I am just shocked that Avery Books agreed to go along with this. This is so bad. And this is, of course, Vic Fontaine. There would be no other person who would represent my number one worst holodeck episode in all of Star Trek. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me. I hope all that disagreeing that you just did with me doesn't turn you off from subscribing to my channel, and please feel free to leave your least favorite holodeck episodes in the comments, and join me next week as I talk about my 10 best holodeck episodes. See you then.